Ready? 1, 2, 3. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Chalkboard History, Volume 2, Part 2, Part 3, Part 4. We're going to talk about everybody's favorite sexy Confederate general today. Not Nathan Bedford Forrest. We're going to talk about Patrick Cleburne because, well, Pat Cleburne's pretty cool.
He's probably one of the most people who come to Franklin who know hardly anything seem to know that he was here.
He has a fan club. Pat Cleburne has a fan club. And I first learned about Mr. Cleburne. I'm sure I read something about him, but it was when I read Elizabeth and Howell Purdue's biography of Cleburne, which is published in I believe the earlier mid-1970s. So when I read it, it was only 10 years old, which shows how old I am. It's a great bio. I think it is still the best biography of Patrick Cleburne. So why do you think Pat Cleburne is so either well-known or beloved in the Civil War community?
I think he had a remarkable ability to inspire his men. He was a really good leader, and I think they would do anything he asked them to do. And so he becomes, is it Jefferson Davis that refers to him as the Stonewall of the West? He becomes this impenetrable force, I think, he and his men. And when he's thrown at the enemy, he... at Shiloh, first time he looks across the field at William Sherman, he and his guys kind of let him have it, and so I think he's known to always do what he's asked to do.
He is interesting because having been to every place that he ever fought in the Civil War and probably read everything he ever wrote in the official records, there are two things that come out. He's a very good soldier. He's a very good officer. He's also a very good writer. He's very thorough. What I find so interesting is how he has been elevated to this status of almost immortality.
Yeah.
And I think dying is really an effective tool to make you super cool with the crowd. It's not just it's Stonewall Jackson, it's Pat Cleburne, it's John F. Kennedy, it's Marilyn Monroe, it's Kurt Cobain. Dying when you're young in some sort of tragic. Charlie Kirk, will forever be remembered in a way that he may never have been remembered. But his assassination and the cutting short of a life, and so Cleburne,
he's frozen in that moment,
disappearing into the smoke.
Yeah.
What I find interesting about Cleburne is he was very well known within Civil War literature. There's a number of articles about him in Confederate Veteran Magazine. He was just well known as a very good commander. No monuments, no statues. There's nothing about Cleburne. He is very similar to 50 or 100 other officers. William Loring, who we just talked about, Daniel Harvey Hill, George Pickett, for different reasons. They're just all well known. All of a sudden, around the time of the centennial, Cleburne becomes uber popular. And I think a lot of it has to do with the Battle of Franklin. This all zeroes in on these 6 generals, 5 of whom we barely ever talk about. It's Cleburne. And then Cleburne is killed by Hood at Franklin. Then the biography comes out. And I think he just becomes, he becomes elevated in a way that he never was. So then I went back and really started looking at things that he had done. And so we're just, he's at Shiloh, and he's at Murfreesboro, and he's at Perryville in Kentucky. So, he's in a lot of places. He's at Chickamauga. What I find interesting about Cleburne is in the summer of 1864, when there's an opening for a corps position, Cleburne is not really considered for that spot. And there's a lot of people like, well, if Cleburne had command of the army, well, Cleburne hadn't even commanded a corps. And I think that this is where some of the immortality comes in. But
he didn't have a chance to fail, so we don't know if he would have failed. We don't see.
He didn't have a chance.
You can always imagine what might have happened.
And we don't know why he wasn't proffered for that position. It might have been because somebody didn't think that he was right for the spot. It could have been because William Hardy thought Hardy was a corps commander, and Hardy liked Cleburne in his corps and wanted to keep him. So it could have been maybe not the right guy or shielding him. Frank Cheatham ends up getting that spot. But we have to go back 6 months before that, because this is another, I think, huge myth where there's no real evidence to back up the claim that Pat Cleburne was not promoted because he has suggested that slaves should be armed. It's possible, but there's no evidence. So tell us what Cleburne does on that January night in 1864.
Yeah, in a meeting of the divisional and corps commanders of the Army of Tennessee.
In Dalton, Georgia. I've been to the house.
Stop.
Yes, I have.
Wow.
Yeah.
So he makes what he thinks is a very practical suggestion. He's already watching the United States Army enlist black men. I mean, the United States Army began with like 4 times as many men to draw from already, and now they're enlisting black men. In this situation, the Confederate Army's desperate. We're reaching out to draft kids as young as 17 and men as old as 44. And he says, listen, we have a force available to us, and all we have to do is free them. All the slaves want is to be free, and if you free them, they will fight for us. And why would they not fight harder for us? They know us. They like us.
He mentions Thermopylae.
Yes, well, because he was trained in the classics.
Right.
Yeah,
he's talking about the old Spartan warriors, and it's just crazy, the sort of education level.
Yeah, and so he says this is a logical idea, and also we can do something that the U.S. Army can't do. They can free him, but we can free his family. We can promise freedom to his family. Why would he not be loyal? And he said, also, we're pulling white men into this army that don't want to be here.
So let's just play around for a second. So you're being Cleburne, so I'm going to be William H.T. Walker. Keep talking about freeing slaves.
Okay, so we have white men in our army right now that don't want to be here, and they're disloyal, and they're dangerous to have in the troops. It would be far better to have a black man who wants to be here, who is fighting for his freedom and the freedom of his family.
So Walker is literally sitting in the room going, oh my God, what is he saying? I can't believe he's doing this.
I know. Now, to your point, he says it prettier than I'm saying it right now. His language is gorgeous.
Well,
I mean, you
Walker's
should read the proposal.
Probably not like really moving. He's probably just sitting there simmering. He's steaming. It's like the old cartoon where the smoke is coming out of his ears.
His face is getting tighter
but
and tighter.
Know that most everybody in the room is like, wait, what? Is he
Well, and he even says, we're not fighting to preserve slavery, we're fighting for independence. And I think some of them are going, oh, wait a minute, I'm fighting. I don't know what you're fighting for, but...
So this is an interesting moment in Civil War, and we're making some light of it because I think you have to some degree, because everybody in the room, Cleburne is actually making a reasonable pitch. And everybody in the room, for the most part, is absolutely and completely unreasonable. This is where we get into, I think, Cleburne. I have described him many times as being profoundly naive about white Southern culture. He's an immigrant. Okay?
And he's still pretty new.
Right. So he's an immigrant. He's from Ireland. He's lived in the United States. He came here. He lived in the United States a decade before the war. Never owned slaves.
And didn't like slavery. I mean, he came from a country where he had seen exploitive labor. Right. He didn't love it.
So I think that he had no idea how deeply entrenched it really was outside of his little pocket, which was Helena, Arkansas. Certainly he saw slavery and knew slave owners. I don't think he had any idea. He also, however, on the flip side, if you and there's your homework assignment, you got to read Cleburne's address or memorial, I think it was called. There's a moment in there where you see, okay, so he hasn't quite figured this out, it seems, but he has completely embraced this other position. He addresses the fact that Northerners are enlisting, he calls them their own motley population. That's a clear reference to immigrants. which is really astounding.
Coming from the mouth
that an immigrant is complaining about other Irish or Germans or Scandinavians enlisting in the U.S. Army. I do think it's possible that as an Irishman, he saw the North a lot like he probably saw England. So there's a lot of things in play that night. And William H.T. Walker, is the guy we were joking about earlier. Yeah. Walker is so incensed that he goes straight to Jefferson Davis. He goes right over Joseph Johnston's head.
Yeah, Johnston wasn't going to send it any further.
Right.
He was done. He was like, okay, no, but okay,
This
we're done.
is actually a moment for someone who's often pretty critical of Johnston. I believe that Johnston was like, holy crap, there's no way that we can ever let this out because the president's going to think my commanders have lost their mind. Walker goes right over his head. Davis gets it, and Davis, in such typical Jefferson Davis fashion, he declares that the entire memorial is so inflammatory that it must be suppressed. And he said it would be injurious to the public. Davis knew if white people ever found out that they were considering arming black men, and I would probably guess primarily white slave owners, that they would revolt.
Yeah.
And so it was covered up. We only know of the memorial's existence. They actually did such a good job covering it up that all the copies were destroyed, except one. One of Cleburne's staff officers, a guy named Calhoun Benham, kept his copy. He did not destroy it. And Benham died in San Francisco, I think in the early 1880s. That memorial was found in his desk drawers. And if you ever read it in the official records, it's not in sequence. It's all in those very late volumes where they had like addenda and stuff that got added in as they were finishing up the compilation. It's really incredible that it came that close to never being known. And in fact,
it's odd that none of those guys talked about it.
They never.
Somewhere down the road, somebody was like, "You're not going to believe what."
Yeah, and they never did. They literally kept it that quiet. Now, some of them, like Cleburne and States Rights Gist and so on, died. Yeah. Well, Walker died. William Walker was killed outside Atlanta 7 months later. But there was quite a reaction. Joseph Wheeler said that Cleburne would have been hanged in his hometown. William Bate actually said that Cleburne had committed sedition. Gist was particularly upset about it, said something like he detected the serpent of abolitionism coiled beneath the table on which Cleburne penned his monstrous proposal.
Oh my God.
It was such flowery language for saying, I don't like him. You know, how dare he do this?
My daddy would be so mad at you if he knew what you were saying.
Well, and then, so what happened? Cleburne moved on. There is no evidence that this held him back. And you know what the best piece of evidence is, everybody? Nobody knew about it. Now, Davis did, and Johnston did, and maybe Hood did later on. I don't think Jefferson Davis would have held that against Cleburne. I really don't. I think that Cleburne ended up staying as a division commander because that's what he was best suited to do.
It was a sweet spot.
And he was really good there.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you get into the fall of 1864. He temporarily commanded a corps at Jonesboro. Did not do a good job. It was not a good performance, which often shows the jump from division to corps level. Not everybody makes that jump well. Even Hood, who's a very good division commander, was, you know, sort of an average corps commander. And then Cleburne and his men were involved in the Battle of Spring Hill. They did not secure the Columbia Pike.
Because they were pulled back.
But I think that between Cleburne and Cheatham, who knew one another very well, they quickly realized that mistakes had been made. They had made mistakes. But everybody was culpable to some degree that night. And then there is the next day.
And he's carrying that. He's carrying that weight with him. And
well, we know that from a letter A.P. Stewart wrote that said he gave his life the next day at Franklin in the same emotion of understanding the errors made at Spring Hill. So yes, I think they're trying to rectify it. So what happens early on November 30th when the Confederates are forming up?
Well, there's a discussion. There's a meeting at the Harrison House, and
Right.
Hood says that he's going to that he thinks they need to attack. I mean, it's kind of their last chance to reduce Schofield's numbers, and Cleburne doesn't think it's a good idea. Cheatham doesn't think it's a good idea. I think Forrest remonstrates, but what else is he supposed to do? He can't flank him.
Right. And so to go back to where we started, Cleburne in this sort of myth, but also facts that surround him in his really final moments. There are 3 things that happen in probably the span of a couple of hours. At that meeting, Cleburne mounts his horse, and his doctor, D.A. Linthicum, actually said Hood came out there and repeated the orders. Mm-hmm. And Cleburne simply looked down at Hood and said, "I'll take the works or fall in the attempt." A short while later, when they're somewhere in the vicinity of Winston Hill, Daniel Govan, who was a friend of his but brigade commander, said, casual remark about, "I don't think there are going to be many of us that are going to get back to Arkansas." And Cleburne said, "Well, Govan, if we're going to die, we should die like men." You can't make that stuff up.
Right.
But to me, the most telling episode is when the attack begins. There's a moment. Cleburne had wanted a battery. The Confederates didn't have a lot of artillery, and Cleburne wanted a battery moved into a particular position. And this officer, Leonard Mangum, rode up and told him he had the battery. And Cleburne, they've already broken Wagner's advanced line. And Cleburne said to him simply, "There's not enough time. Go with Granberry." Mm-hmm. And Cleburne went in on horseback. Horse shot out, ends up going in on foot. This is a division commander, everyone. He had no business doing that. And he went in that afternoon like he was commanding a company of infantry. I think it's pretty clear that the orders came down. He expressed his concerns, but the orders came. You salute, you do what you're told. And he went in with his men. Mm-hmm. And that's not a myth. Mm-hmm. That's the truth. And he went in with his men like a lot of other officers did. But Cleburne was exceptional. He was exceptionally talented. And
he loved his adopted home. I mean, he makes a statement not too long before that battle that if the South is to fall, I hope I fall with it. Because He couldn't imagine a world.
They were at Powder Springs, Georgia.
Yeah. Couldn't imagine a world without that. So
yeah,
I think he was ready to throw everything in.
Dying's not such a bad option when you consider the alternative from his perspective. Mm-hmm. No doubt that night, and especially as you're getting closer to dawn, there were men who knew he was not around. They didn't know what had happened to him, but they knew that he wasn't there. And then he was found. His body was found not long after sunup, and it was taken to Carnton. I found a letter years ago written by a staff officer, George Williams, to Cleburne's aide-de-camp, Irving Buck, who'd actually been wounded a couple of months earlier. So Buck wasn't with Cleburne at Franklin, which probably saved his life. Mm-hmm. And George Williams said that Cleburne's body was taken to Loring's Hospital, which is Carnton. Mm-hmm. And he said the body was taken to Loring's Hospital where it was identified. And I have always found that particular phraseology very important. I don't believe they actually knew or were certain it was Cleburne until they got him to Carnton.
Why do you think that is?
There was another account that was put together years later by J.P. Young, and he said he spoke to Carrie McGavick. Mm-hmm. And Carrie had put a handkerchief over Cleburne's face. And I had just never really thought about it other than they just covered up a dead man's face. Well, but he wasn't the only one there. Mm-hmm. I think Cleburne was unrecognizable. Mm-hmm. I think that's what the man was saying, because Cleburne was hit in the chest. He was apparently found on his back. His body had been looted during the night. But I think he was probably covered in blood. He had powder.
Well, and we know plenty of men who lay on that field received subsequent injuries. I mean, something could have happened.
Well, and I think, he could have been hit again, but he could have also been trampled, by God knows how many men. Yeah. And unless you knew him personally, you wouldn't know it was Pat Cleburne. Mm-hmm. And they took him over and they probably cleaned him up, and I think that's when they figured out who it was, because he'd been missing all night, which is really a sad and tragic end to a life. Mm-hmm. And then he was taken south. He was buried at St. John's, southwest of Columbia.
And there's an interesting story around that, too, because he had just passed through there a few days before, right, taking a little walk around the churchyard, and said it wouldn't be so bad to die if this is where you were going to end up.
And that's where he ended up. And he was there until 1869, when he was exhumed. And a ladies' memorial association, who were really the first groups that were caring for the dead in large numbers, and his remains were taken to Helena, where they are today. They rest Evergreen Cemetery. It's at the top of a big hill that overlooks the Mississippi. It's a beautiful place. But he is a central character to our story. We might talk about Cleburne every day like we do John Bell Hood and John Schofield, but I bet he gets mentioned almost every day by somebody on some tour at some point. And he's also part of Carnton's legacy. He's among those men that were brought there, and their bodies lay there for a time until they were taken south.
So their men could pay respects.
Right. And so what is Cleburne's legacy? Is he the myth? Is he the man who could have commanded the army? In my opinion, I don't think so. I think he was a very, very good division commander. We'll never even know what he could have been as a corps commander, because he did that for literally about 2 days. And but what we do know is that his life was certainly interesting. A man born, whether he was born just before midnight or just after midnight
on the 16th or the 17th.
Right.
17th is romantic, right?
St. Patrick's Day.
Little controversy.
A funny thing is when people come in and they'll say they're from Cleburne, Texas, because that's how Texans pronounce the town. It was a town named after him. But it's Cleburne, because you couldn't get an Irishman to be able to say Cleburne. It comes out Cleburne. And, the one thing we didn't mention is that Cleburne isn't your prototypical, Roman Catholic Irishman.
No, he was a Protestant.
He was a Protestant, and his family was reasonably well-to-do.
His dad was a doctor.
His family's home is still standing. You can visit it in County Cork.
The room where he was born.
Right. It's still there, and you can see where he was born. You can see where he died. I wrote the text for the marker that's on the battlefield that,
close-ish
approximates his death. And that was another part of the reclamation story that was great, was to be able to save that ground where Cleburne had fallen. And
it's powerful to stand down in that little gully, where they were having to charge up into the face of those cannon.
If you stand at that marker and you look north, you can see it was a hill. It is a hill. Mm-hmm. It's not that dissimilar to that last little push up towards Seminary Ridge at Gettysburg, which so many of those guys on the third day of July 1863, that was a slow slope up. And it's the same thing at Franklin. And all of a sudden, you see how formidable the position was. And Cleburne was probably down before the sun went down. And then his men got turned back, and then the war was over, and he was remembered. And I think probably, I actually do think today we're getting a little bit off the myth mountain.
More balance, because he doesn't have to be a god. He was enough.
Yeah.
Who he was enough. He was a courageous, good leader. And
one of the 3 best division commanders of the entire Civil War. And I give these in no particular order. Pat Cleburne, John Bell Hood, and Winfield Scott Hancock. You wanted a unit to take a position and inflict some casualties on the enemy. Those were the guys, those were the units you would have wanted. Any last thoughts? Pat Cleburne. Thanks, everybody.